Welcome to the podcast, Short Talks.
You know, we have this shared, almost universally accepted script for how transactions are supposed to work in our daily lives.
Right.
Think about like standing in front of a vending machine. You put your dollar in, you make your selection, you press the button, and you expect the snack to drop.
Yeah, it's a very clean, rational, one-to-one exchange, right? Energy goes in, result comes out.
Exactly. I mean, it's the foundation of modern efficiency. You perform action A, and you are entitled to outcome B.
It gives us a sense of control over our environment, you know?
Right. And if the snack doesn't drop, you get frustrated. I mean, you might even literally shake the machine.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you feel cheated. You know, you've fulfilled your end of the bargain and the machine just failed you. But let's take that exact same vending machine mentality, that deep-seated expectation of input equals output, and apply it to the absolute deepest parts of our human existence.
Which is dangerous territory.
Right. Like, what happens when we apply that transactional logic to prayer?
Well, we end up doing a massive amount of existential shaking of the machine, I think.
Yeah.
We experience this profound, sometimes like life-altering frustration because the universe isn't dispensing the specific outcome we punched in.
We put in the good behavior, we said the right words.
I'd have back with silence.
Exactly. Which brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. So we are exploring a really profound set of ideas drawn from an article called Prayer, the Breath of the Soul by Metropolitan Constantinos of Singapore.
Yes.
But, you know, we aren't just going to recap his article. We're going to use it to completely deconstruct that modern transactional view of the spiritual life.
Right, by looking through the lens of ancient Orthodox Christian thought.
Exactly. We want to figure out what it actually means to connect with the divine, especially when that connection feels like it's being met with an absolute deafening silence.
Which requires a radically different framework. I mean, the ancient perspective challenges almost every single thing our fast-paced, results-oriented culture teaches us about, well, asking for things.
Yeah, and evaluating success.
Yeah, it forces us to ask whether our concept of unanswered prayer is actually just a fundamental misunderstanding of the language being spoken.
So if you're listening right now, whether you consider yourself deeply religious or you're just spiritually curious, or maybe you're just trying to understand how some of the greatest ancient minds managed to process existential silence.
And human suffering.
Right, without losing their minds. This conversation is going to fundamentally shift your perspective. We're exploring a central, deeply uncomfortable tension.
Yeah, it's a big one.
What if the most painful moments of your life, the moments of your seemingly unanswered prayers, are actually the most profound answers you could possibly receive?
It completely flips the script on what silence actually means. But, you know, to get to that understanding, we first have to tear down the scaffolding of what we assume prayer is.
We have to rebuild it from the ground up.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. The overarching theme for Metropolitan Constantinos is that we have to stop treating prayer as a technique.
Right. It's not a tool.
It is not a checklist of requests that you just like mail off to a distant detached manager in the sky. When you look at figures like St. John of the Ladder, he describes it not as a transaction, but as a face-to-face encounter.
He calls it the union of man with God, right?
Exactly.
And we also see this with Evagrius Ponticus, who is this major figure in the ascetic tradition. And when we say ascetic, we're talking about individuals who literally went out into the desert.
Like completely off the grid.
They're completely off the grid, stripping away every possible worldly distraction, specifically to study the mechanics of the human mind and soul.
Wow.
Yeah. And Evagrius defines prayer as the conversation of the mind with God. Note the word conversation there.
Right, not a monologue.
Exactly. This isn't just reciting a magical incantation to get a result. It is a dialogue originating from your deepest, most authentic self, communicating directly with the creator of reality.
It's the difference between sending a formal, highly formatted email to customer service versus like having a raw, unfiltered conversation with your absolute closest confidant.
That's a great way to put it.
But there is a catch here that I find deeply intimidating.
Oh.
Yeah. This ancient perspective insists that prayer isn't something you just do on occasion. It's not a phone call where you place your order and then hang up and go about your day.
Right.
St. Theophan the Recluse famously said that to pray is to stand with the mind and the heart before God day and night until the end of life.
Yeah, it is an incredibly intense almost overwhelming standard when you first hear it.
I'll go a step further and say it sounds practically impossible.
Right. I mean,
Like if you, the listener, are navigating the chaotic realities of modern daily life, you're sitting in brutal commuter traffic, you're managing a team of stressed out employees, or you're just trying to get your kids to finish their homework.
yeah.
How is it humanly possible to literally stand with your mind in your heart day and night? I mean, the immediate reaction is to dismiss this as a lifestyle that only applies to monks living in total isolation.
What's fascinating here is that the tradition isn't demanding a continuous, grueling physical exercise, you know? Okay.
Or a ceaseless verbal repetition that distracts you from driving your car or doing your job.
It is framing this as an unceasing awareness of the divine presence.
An unceasing awareness.
Let's break down the psychology of that. Think about when you are profoundly in love, or when you have just welcomed a newborn child into your life.
Oh, yeah.
You don't spend every consecutive second of the day actively speaking to them or staring at their face. You still go to the grocery store. You still do your taxes.
Right. Life goes on.
But the awareness of that person, the gravity of your love for them, colors every single thing you do. It sits quietly in the background of your consciousness, subtly dictating your decisions, your mood, and basically your baseline state of being.
Okay, so it's like a background radiation of love.
Exactly.
It changes the atmosphere of your internal world without requiring you to abandon your external responsibilities. It's not a never-ending phone call. It's more like living in the same room.
Precisely. And that continuous background awareness brings us to the actual physics of this concept.
Okay, the physics of the soul. Right. Why is this continuous state biologically and spiritually necessary for human survival? The Orthodox framework goes back to the very beginning of the human story. The idea that humans were created in the image and likeness of God.
But there is a critical distinction to be made there, right? Because image and likeness isn't a static stamp placed on humanity, it's a trajectory.
It is a trajectory. The image is essentially the hardware you were born with.
Like your free will.
Yeah, your free will, your intellect, your capacity to love. But the likeness is the software you have to actively choose to run.
Wow. Okay.
Is the goal of developing into active, living communion with God. So the hardware is given, but the likeness is achieved through relationship.
And if you choose not to run that software, I mean, the ancient writers don't sugarcoat the consequences.
No, they don't.
Without this communion, they argue the soul undergoes actual, tangible suffering. They use this visceral analogy of a limb that has been cut off from its blood supply.
Yeah, it's intense.
The limb doesn't just sit there in a neutral state of peace, right?
Yeah.
It grows numb, it atrophies, and eventually it dies because it is disconnected from its life source.
St. John Chrysostom provides a similar, incredibly vivid analogy. He compares the soul without prayer to a plant deprived of light and water.
Oh, that's a good one.
Now consider the mechanics of a plant. A plant doesn't view sunlight as a luxury item or like a fun extracurricular activity.
Right, it's not a hobby.
Photosynthesis is the fundamental biological requirement for its survival. Without it, the plant inevitably withers. Chrysostom is arguing that the human soul withers in the exact same way without this connection.
It's not a hobby for spiritual people.
No, it is literally the breath of the soul.
That biological necessity perfectly sets up St. Gregory Palamas's concept of noetic prayer.
Yes, absolutely.
Palamas argues that the mind needs to actively return into itself and ascend toward God. And he warns that if it doesn't make that necessary inward movement, the mind inevitably scatters among external things and loses contact with its life source.
Scatters among external things.
Yeah. And when I picture a mind scattering among external things, I immediately think of the modern attention economy. I mean, this 14th century saint basically diagnosed the psychological crisis of the 21st century.
He absolutely did. The fragmentation of the modern mind is exactly what Palamas was warning about. It's just amplified by technology now.
Think about it. You have 20 browser tabs open, your smartwatch is vibrating with a news alert. You are scrolling through a feed of strangers' lives.
Constantly.
And you can literally feel your attention, your very sense of self, shattering into a million tiny, anxious pieces. You are scattered across all these external inputs.
Right.
Ancient prayer, in this context, isn't about asking for a new car. It's the ultimate grounding mechanism. It is the violent practice of pulling that scattered self back from the noise, forcing it back into itself, and anchoring it to reality.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that anchoring process accomplishes something really crucial. It destroys our illusions. Well, St. Isaac the Syrian points out that the struggle of prayer is the exact environment where genuine humility is cultivated. When you attempt to pull your scattered mind back and focus on the divine, you immediately realize how weak your focus actually is.
Oh, no, man.
You realize how addicted you are to external stimulation and how utterly incapable you are of sustaining your own peace.
Which is a terrifying realization.
Yeah.
You sit in silence and realize you aren't the master of your own mind at all.
It is terrifying, but it is deeply necessary because recognizing your own weakness, recognizing that you actually need external grace, paradoxically brings you much closer to God than any illusion of self-sufficiency ever could.
It shatters the ego.
Exactly. It forces you to rely on the Creator, moving you further along that path from the static image toward the actual likeness.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let's say you accept all of this.
Yeah.
You understand the stakes. You view prayer as the breath of the soul, the blood in the limb, the sunlight for the plant.
You're doing the work. Right? You are doing everything right. You are gasping for that air. You are seeking that sunlight. You are crying out for help in a moment of desperate need. And the sky is just dark.
Yeah.
The silence is absolute. We have to address the crisis of unanswered prayer because this is where the theory hits the brutal reality of human suffering.
It is arguably the most agonizing experience in the spiritual life. When you are pouring your soul out and receiving nothing in return, the immediate, highly rational temptation is to conclude one of three things.
Which are?
That God is entirely silent, God is indifferent to your suffering, or God is actively rejecting you. But St. Isaac the Syrian offers a radically different interpretation of that silence. He teaches that the delayed answer is not a refusal, it is pedagogy.
Right, it's a form of teaching.
Yeah. The framework here uses a parent-child analogy. A responsible parent doesn't hand a toddler a sharp knife just because the toddler is crying for it passionately.
They'd be a terrible parent if they did.
Exactly. The parent sees the broader consequences. The argument is that God, seeing the soul from an eternal vantage point that we cannot possibly comprehend, knows exactly what we are asking for and is deliberately preparing us for something greater.
St. Nicholas Kavasilis takes this concept and dives into the actual mechanics of what that waiting period does to the human soul.
Okay, what does he say?
He argues that God delays the answer specifically to strengthen your longing. The unquenched desire of waiting actually stretches the soul, turning the waiting itself into a vessel for greater grace.
I have to stop you there and push back hard on behalf of anyone listening who is currently in the middle of a nightmare.
Okay, fair.
Because if you, the listener, are going through a devastating crisis, a terrifying medical diagnosis, the sudden loss of your livelihood, or the grief of losing someone you love.
Yeah, real trauma.
Being told that God's silence is just pedagogy, or that it's like a parent holding back a toy. I mean, that could feel incredibly dismissive. Honestly, it might even feel cruel.
I completely hear that.
How does this ancient framework reconcile the intense, visceral pain of that silence without just telling people to, get over it?
That is the essential, unavoidable question. And it's crucial to understand that the Orthodox tradition does not dismiss that pain. It actually centers it as the mechanism of transformation.
The pain itself.
Yes. The pain of the silence isn't a glitch in the system. It is the forge. Let's look closer at St. Kavasilis' idea of the soul as a vessel, and let's define what we mean by grace.
Okay.
In this context, grace isn't just a warm, fuzzy emotion. It is the actual transformative presence and energy of the divine.
So how does pain help us hold more of that energy?
Think about the psychology of instant gratification. If you are instantly handed every single thing you ask for the moment you feel discomfort, your capacity for depth remains incredibly shallow.
You never have to stretch.
Exactly. Your vessel remains the size of a thimble. You become habituated to easy relief. But when you are forced to wait, when you have to endure the agony of longing and crying out into the void, that sheer desperation hollows you out. It breaks down your ego. It expands your emotional and spiritual capacity. The tradition argues that the agonizing silence is actually doing the heavy lifting of making you capable of holding a much deeper, more profound level of grace than your original, smaller self even knew how to ask for.
That completely upends how we measure a successful prayer. The emptiness isn't a void where God failed to show up.
No.
The emptiness is an excavation site where a larger foundation is being poured. Which leads us to the anatomy of an unseen answer. We start to realize that the silence might not just be a delay while we wait for the real answer.
It's bigger than that.
The silence might actually be the answer, perfectly disguised as an absence.
St. Maximus the Confessor introduces a brilliant term for this. He calls it pedagogical abandonment.
Pedagogical abandonment.
Yeah. It is an apparent, deeply felt withdrawal of grace that God intentionally permits. And the mechanics behind why it is permitted are fascinating. It is designed to test and strengthen faith, ensuring that our relationship with the divine is built on genuine love, rather than a transactional exchange of perceptible gifts and good feeling.
You're right back to the vending machine.
Exactly.
If God answered every prayer immediately, giving us exactly what we wanted, exactly when we wanted it, we wouldn't actually love God. We would just love the vending machine.
Precisely. The relationship would remain entirely mercenary. We would only be engaged for the spiritual snacks and the immediate emotional relief.
Yeah.
Pedagogical abandonment forces the ultimate crisis of intention. Do you actually love the Creator, or do you merely love the comfort and the things the Creator can provide? When the comfort is removed, your true motivation is exposed.
That perfectly explains the mystery of unexpected answers.
Yeah.
Because we operate on such a literal physical level, We beg for a physical healing, and instead we're given a profound, almost supernatural patience.
Right.
We ask for a suffocating problem to be miraculously removed from our lives, and instead the problem stays. But we are given the crushing, yet necessary strength to carry it.
St. Porphyrios of Capsocoliva, a much more modern voice in this tradition, observed this dynamic constantly. He taught that God always answers, without exception, but the answer almost always surpasses our limited imagination.
Because we're asking for the wrong things.
Sort of, yeah. He gives us what our soul truly needs for its eternal development, not what our anxious minds think we need for immediate relief.
But isn't it terrifying to realize that even doing it perfectly doesn't guarantee a rescue?
Yeah.
I mean, the ultimate example of this has to be Christ in Gethsemane.
Yes.
It is the absolute distillation of everything we were discussing. Christ, in his full humanity, facing unimaginable torture, prayed 3 separate times for the cup of suffering to pass from him. He asked for specific, measurable outcome to not be crucified.
And we have to look closely at the result of that deeply agonizing, perfect prayer. The answer he received was not a supernatural rescue mission. The answer was not release from the impending cross.
The heavens didn't open up and pull him out of the garden?
No, they didn't. The answer was the internal strength to accept the cross, to bear the unbearable weight of it, and ultimately to defeat death by going entirely through it rather than escaping around it.
Wow.
The ancient tradition insists that this is not proof of God's silence or absence. It is the absolute deepest form of a divine answer.
So what does this all mean for us? For you, listening to this right now, wrestling with your own unmet expectations. It demands a radical paradigm shift in how you interpret the empty spaces in your life.
It really does.
Unanswered prayers aren't a broken connection. They aren't a sign that your spiritual Wi-Fi is down or that you didn't put enough coins in the machine. They are a profound, invisible yes to a deeper necessity that you didn't even realize your soul required.
This raises an important question for all of us to reflect on regarding our own internal posture. When we pray, when we seek any form of divine connection, what is our actual goal? Are we seeking to align our limited will with eternal reality? Or are we just frantically trying to bend reality to serve our limited will? The ultimate conclusion drawn from these ancient thinkers is that the true, lasting fruit of prayer is trust.
Trust, which is vastly different from getting what you want. It's trusting the terrifying process of the excavation.
Right. When we say the words, "Thy will be done," the modern ear almost always interprets that as a statement of helpless, cynical resignation.
Yeah, we say it when we've lost. Like, well, I guess I have no leverage here, so whatever happens, happens.
Exactly. But this tradition argues the exact opposite. Saying, "Thy will be done," is not a surrender to random chaos. It is the absolute highest maturity of the human soul.
That's a huge shift.
It is the conscious, difficult acknowledgement that our own will, no matter how good, pure, and desperately urgent it seems to us in the moment, is inherently limited by our tiny perspective. Divine providence, conversely, views the entirety of your life and the intricate web of the entire universe through the limitless lens of eternity.
To offer some very real comfort amidst that incredibly steep challenge, there is a beautiful guarantee from St. Nectarios of Pentapolis. He insists that genuine prayer is never, ever lost in the void.
Never.
He said that when you pray, one of 3 distinct things happens. You receive exactly what you asked for, you receive something far better that you lacked the vision to ask for, or you receive the invisible strength to endure its absence. but the energy of that connection is never wasted.
That is a deeply stabilizing framework. It removes the panic and the paranoia from the silence. It tells us that the transaction isn't broken. The currency is just different.
That's brilliant.
And that brings us to a final brilliant metaphor that perfectly encapsulates the agonizing disconnect we so often feel. The reality is God is never actually silent. He is simply communicating in the language of eternity.
While we are sitting here on Earth, anxiously checking our watches, frantically waiting for an answer in the language of time, it is fundamentally a translation issue. We're demanding a neat, chronological, instant gratification answer from a reality that operates outside of time altogether.
Which is exactly why the answers so often look to us like frustrating delays or brutal abandonments or completely different outcomes than we expected.
Right, because of our limited view.
We can only see the current painful moment, whereas the eternal answer is working on the entirety of our existence.
Which leaves us with something really powerful to mull over as we wrap up. We started this deep dive by talking about the frustration of shaking the vending machine when the universe doesn't give us what we want when we want it.
Yeah.
But since the divine speaks the language of eternity,
Okay.
and we are trapped experiencing the language of time, how might changing your perception of time itself completely alter your current reality?
That changes everything.
If you stop viewing your current struggles, your intensely unmet desires, and your deep, agonizing silences as isolated ticking moments on a clock that are running out,
Running out, exactly.
and instead tried to view them as tiny, essential threads being meticulously woven into an infinite, eternal tapestry, how might that entirely change the way you perceive the silences in your own life?
It transforms the silence from a terrifying absence of sound into a necessary, holy space for creation.
So the next time you find yourself aggressively shaking that existential machine, maybe take a breath, step back, and try to listen to what the silence is actually trying to build inside of you.
Thank you very much for your time. See you soon.